So how does creativity work? And can you make a career of it? That's why we're here tonight. It's going to be crazy fun for those of you who are already living in a creative space, whether you're high level or low level or entry level. And it's going to be great for those of you who are wondering if you could actually be a part of it. Before I talk more directly to Vera and Delilah, I want to share something with you. I want to share the TV commercial that actually inspired this show. I'd like to introduce you all to Arlene.
This is Arlene Manco. She was born February 29th, 1936, a leap day, which means she has a birthday once every 4 years.
I was technically 5 years old when I got married.
This leap day, Arlene turns 21, legal drinking age.
30,679 days I've waited to turn 21. I had 7 kids in 10 years. Do you think sometimes I didn't want to drink?
Arlene has never had a legal drink in her life.
Following the rules and doing what you're told was important to me because that's what I was taught. You don't get in trouble when you do what you're told. But I'm not an angel. That's okay. I'm ready to party.
We wanted her first legal drink to be aviation gin.
Holy Moses!
Happy birthday, Arlene.
I didn't know who Ryan Reynolds was. And, they'd say, "You don't know who he is?" I said, "No, I don't know who he is,"
Ignore her. She's been drinking.
So, first of all, thank you, Arlene. That was pretty amazing. And I also just want to say, before anything else, that is one sticky idea. And so I want to introduce to the grid now, Vera Keiter and Delilah Kim, the creative team behind the Aviator Gin commercial. Thank you guys and welcome here tonight to How Creativity Works, kind of kicking stuff off. Hope to do this as a series, but only if this is successful. So there's a lot of pressure on you guys. Introducing Vera. Vera is currently a senior copywriter at Facebook. She's a graduate of BIC's inaugural class of 2015. Very proud of that. She was featured in the Drum's 50 Under 30 and has taught creative concepts in the BIC program with her partner, Delilah Kim, who is also a senior creative. She's an art director at Facebook. Delilah, you've graduated from SVA and you were also featured along with Vera in the Drum's 50 Under 50 and the coolest picture of all the 50, you guys had the coolest picture. As partners since meeting at BBDO, these two met. You could correct me if I'm wrong. You're right. You guys met at BBDO. And your work has appeared at Forbes, Fast Company, Ad Age Creativity, Business Insider, and more. So you guys are rock stars, rising stars, and we can barely even contain you. So before getting in deeper into the bio and making you blush, I'm just making Delilah blush. Vera's not blushing yet. I will do that. I will do that by the end of the night, I promise. Before we get more into how two gals from different parts of the world found each other to make creativity work, I would like you guys to spill the tea about this gin commercial and tell us all about how it came about and give us all the dirt, all the backstory that you can give us.
Sure. Thanks for the intro, Nancy. Let's see if Vera blushes by the end of the night. I'm going
to be working on it.
Although this is water and not wine, I'm so That's a great question, Nancy. And I think it's a pretty interesting story because it comes about from what most creatives dream of when they work at an agency, which is an open brief. Correction, an open brief that becomes something, because they often do not become anything. So we were at the time when we produced this aviation gin piece, we were working at a agency called 160 over 90, which is the creative arm of a talent agency network called William Morris Endeavor, now rebranded as Endeavor. So they are a very culturally focused agency. They want to always place their brands in the center of cultural conversation. And as part of kind of their agency identity, they gave out open briefs now and again when they thought there were interesting moments in the cultural calendar. So in the case of this brief, somebody came to the open brief meetings with the insight that this year was a leap year that doesn't come around very often. So the basic ask from the agency was to see what kind of fun ideas we could brainstorm around this cultural moment, which is Leap Day, and try to come up with a proactive idea that we could pitch to one of our very long roster of clients. So that was the basic kind of beginning of the idea. And, Vera and I worked on it for a while. We were very excited. It was, very unique moment. We hadn't really seen any other brands do interesting things for Leap Day yet. And the funny thing was, a lot of the teams that were working on it, us included, I think the initial thought process was very limited to two things. One was the fact that a leap day is an extra day that you get in February every 4 years, an extra day of the year that doesn't exist most of the time, and the fact that it is something called a leap day or the 29th. So very logistical ideas surrounding the idea of having 29 of something, maybe like a 29% discount activation for a hotel brand, you name it. All these sort of kind of logistic ideas. Even ourselves, I think one of our first idea was doing a Refinery 29 partnership, just because the number 29. Those were kind of the first thoughts that came to mind. And the deeper we dug into this, we kind of uncovered this new territory of, how leaplings celebrate their birthdays, or rather don't celebrate their birthdays and need to wait a long time to age 1 year technically than everybody else. So we were just reading a lot of hilarious stories about leaplings mostly complaining on Reddit, about how they don't get birthdays. We found a lot of interesting leaplings, like hockey players who are, 80 something and technically are only 20 something. I forgot the name of the champion. We're so bad at this, Vera.
I didn't even know there was
a famous hockey player. He was maybe somebody knows in the chat. He was a hockey hero, one of the best players. But
we'll type that in, leapling hockey player.
Yes. But basically, it reached a point where we kind of made the connection between the fact that leaplings celebrate birthdays every 4 years, only every 4 years, and the fact that we had a huge roster of alcohol clients who were very interested in courting 21-year-olds. And this is just common for most liquor brands because it's their first kind of meeting with their consumer. This is the time when they can really make an impression and make sure this person drinks whatever they're selling for the rest of their lives, hopefully. So we saw these two kind of phenomenons happening and decided, well, what if one of our brands could actually court a very different 21-year-old, being the 84-year-old leapling, who will finally become 21 in the year of 2020. So that was kind of the process that we came to the idea. I think someone gave us the name.
Henri Richard.
I think it might be also Louis Blue.
Is that him?
Okay. We will confirm after the call and probably add the blog post.
Thank you, Eli. We now know more about him than we need to, actually. So and a few more. More than you thought. That's the interesting thing here is when you dive into something like this, you end up realizing that there's more people. And in the end, it doesn't really matter that there's actually the fewer people, the better on this one.
Yes. So we came up with this idea of initially a video concept, possibly if there was time, an activation where we could throw an actual birthday party for an 84-year-old leapling. It just was a whole campaign idea. We got very excited. And while we were looking through the roster of clients, we realized that maybe because this is a much more mature Liebling than most, it would be befitting to go for a slightly more sophisticated alcohol brand. And our agency happened to have a really good relationship with Ryan Reynolds and Aviation Gin. So we pitched the idea to him. It was a very, very hectic process because the idea came about less than, I would say, 3 weeks before Leap Day, a month.
Right.
Insane timeline. But we sent the idea to him and he was in love with it. He was on board. He happened to have a very capable production company on his hands. So it was just, smooth sailing from there. And we got to see the spot live the week before, half a week before actual Leap Day. And everybody loved Arlene. I mean, we also got really lucky with the casting because she's just a regular person who lives in Pittsburgh, who happens to have a great sense of humor.
How did you, that to me, this whole process is just very kind of ragtag and almost serendipitous in a way. You guys could have come up with this amazing idea, which you did, independent of a brand, independent even of a product. You didn't even have a product category, you just had a date, which I find absolutely fascinating. And then you kind of chased after a brand. And in the chasing of it, you could have run out of track and Leap Year would have been gone. And I guess you could have pursued it for the next year. But how did you, and so you actually were almost running out of track, right? So how did you manage to get that process condensed in such a short period of time?
I think it was a situation where everyone who was on the team really wanted it to happen. And it was funny because everything you're saying is very much the truth. Like most of the time, an idea like that is not getting made. And every single creative has so many ideas like this, yep, like in their imaginary cemetery of their dear, sad creative children. And it's a situation where you kind of, I don't know, all the things had to just align perfectly for it to happen. And that's exactly what happened there. I feel like there was definitely an insane luck involved as well. Just people pushing for it and not giving up. I think we gave up more times than the rest of the team. There were moments where this is not going to happen. And everyone else would be like, what if we try this? What if we, I think it's just, we got lucky with how enthusiastic everyone was.
And it's partially, I think, also knowing which brand to pitch a proactive idea to that also decides a lot of what happens in this case. Because with the short timeline, you need to be strategic about who you're showing the idea to. And Aviation Gin, for one, has been very fearless with their creative. We know of their commercials. Ryan Reynolds is very, he's very adamant and he's very sure of what he wants with his brand. And we felt that because this aligns with the style and, what he's kind of been pushing for in his past commercials, we thought that he might be a really good candidate. And he had a history of pulling very, very quick cards with the Peloton wife commercial. That was a very reactive commercial that he did very, very swiftly in reaction to a cultural event. So just sometimes knowing which client will definitely buy, or most hopefully buy your idea, is, I think, the trick to getting proactive stuff made.
Well, I think in the case too of your agency, though, it's a long roster. You could zig and you could zag. And I think you guys pitched it. You said you pitched it to a number of clients before you got there, or at least until he bid. And so there's a bit of serendipity to that as well.
For sure.
Yeah, sure.
This is the thing that gets me, is how incredibly, for anybody who's been in a conventional agency, and it's interesting because our audience today is all over the place. People who may have never worked in an agency, people who are currently working in an agency, people who want to transfer, students who've never done any of that. And so listening to you guys, it almost seems normal what you just went through to chase after this story. And it's very different. Endeavor and the whole William Morris. I remember when we spoke and you were shifting from BBDO and you talked about the William Morris agency. I'm really interested in hearing a little bit more about your relationship. But before we do, because we're kind of talking about the Endeavor, tell us a little bit about what type of agency this is and why it was a different space for you two as a creative team to play in.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a very different experience for us, especially in comparison with BBDO. So Delilah and I met at BBDO, and I'm sure most people on this call know it's a very big, well-known traditional agency that has their process figured out and kind of, doing their thing. And they're really good at it. And we it was a perfect first job because it kind of taught you this perfect case scenario of the process. Everyone has a job to do, everyone knows exactly how to execute it. It was like a perfect experience in terms of just understanding the process from the beginning to the end and being able to be like a very important part of the mechanism. And I feel like we've met a lot of amazing creative directors there. We got a chance to work on a lot of projects, but what we were kind of leaning towards the most when we were there were specifically kind of non-traditional digital ads. And we were really enjoying thinking of ideas that are kind of outside of the box, which was interesting because BBDO kind of had like this team that was created for that. And we were all just kind of trying to think of this unusual ideas, things that are not necessarily like your traditional TV or radio spot, something that would really get people's attention. And a lot of the time when you pitch ideas like that, you have, you have this collaborator or a partner in mind that you think you could execute it with. And you have all this like, oh, I want to do a comedy show with Tina Fey because I'm obsessed with her. Like you always have this kind of thinking. And I feel like when we got to hear about the opportunity in Endeavor, it felt like a perfect fit because it's a really interesting agency in a sense that you get an access to the talent, right? They have an insane roster of talent, and they also have an insane roster of clients that come to them for other needs other than creative needs.
Yeah, so they actually back up for just 1 second here. For those who are not familiar with William Morris Agency, just tell everybody like what are they at the beginning that they built into this agency?
Yeah, William Morris Endeavor is basically like the biggest talent agency. They represent everyone. Sorry, my cat is trying to make an appearance. They represent
Drake, Rihanna,
exactly,
sports stars.
Most of the celebrities,
they're agents, right? They essentially will place those people in their gigs wherever they are, and that was basically conventionally what their function had been for years and years and years. Is how they were established themselves as a business.
Yeah, and then eventually they basically realized that they already have access to all this talent, and the talent is also hungry for creative ideas. They want to be involved in partnerships. They want to be involved in work with brands. So they could really leverage that and do the work, basically have an in-house creative agency where they connect the dots. And it was exciting because it was we were at BBDO, and BBDO is a giant agency. And this felt like going to a smaller team that is still surrounded by this like armor of a big corporation. Because the creative agency itself was pretty small. The team was very like mighty and quick, and you felt like you have like your voice is always heard, but at the same time, you could always just like, oh, we have a connection to Ryan Reynolds randomly. Like that's the kind of place it was. So I think for us, it felt like a logical next step where we could continue to come up with ideas like that, continue to come up with ideas that feel a little bit out there, involve maybe talent, feel culturally relevant, which was another big thing for Endeavor. Like they wanted to make sure that their work really resonates with, what's going on in the world. And I think they kind of had all the elements to make it happen. And I think that's what sold us on it.
Yeah, no, I remember the night when we were together and you guys were talking about going over, and I'm like, explain it to me again. Explain how the William Morris Agency is turning into a creative agency. Really, really fascinating. And probably dove into that a little earlier because I really wanted to talk about you guys and a lot about what the team dynamic is about, to get even, I guess, to get the definitions a little bit more clear. Both of you, when you talk, which is what I love, use the word we all the time, which is definitely a team thing. And the team dynamic is it's fairly unique in the communications industry, right? In creative departments at ad agencies and branding agencies and public relations firms. And I think that many people don't even understand what does that mean, a creative team. And so you guys have one, and in addition to being a creative team, you've found that you have chased opportunities together as a team to talk really about how tight that relationship is. Take us through that a little bit, how you met and how you work together.
We met at BBDO. We were match made by one of our creative directors. We got an email in the middle of the day to come to the cafeteria. It sounded very urgent and very serious. So we both went, flushed and worried. And the CD sat us down and she said, Vera, Delilah, Delilah, Vera, bye-bye. And she left. So we started talking. We were then kind of put on some open briefs together, some pitches, just to kind of test out the relationship. And I think we hit it off fairly early on. I think it was a lot of things. I mean, it obviously helped that we were both women in creative agencies. There's a sense of camaraderie, I think, when you find another junior female creative. It's not an easy process. But
and
also
a lot. We would eat a lot. We would eat a lot of expensive lunches, like sobas that we couldn't afford early on.
We were very broke the first year of our partnership because we were both too polite to tell the other person that we were too broke and we needed to pack lunches. But we hit it off pretty early. Although we come from two very different backgrounds, me being from South Korea and Vera being from Russia, there are a lot of interesting commonalities between our cultures that we did not know about before we met each other, like how superstitious our cultures are. We're both very superstitious. We share a lot of strange rituals. Vera can speak more to that later. But essentially, when we started working together, we realized that the priorities that we put in our creative process and the work were very, very similar. And I think this is usually the factor that keeps a lot of the creative teams that have longevity. This is the thing that keeps them together. It's the fact that what you value in your work is very, very similar. So we, for one, are very, very much interested in creative ideas that are based on an insight or a big idea. We love the craft, don't get us wrong, but we're not the type of team that can just run with a project because it looks beautiful or because it is a beautifully written manifesto. We need there to be something more than that behind an idea. And so what we wanted in our creative was very, very similar. And when we started working towards that goal, we realized that our processes were also very similar. So there are different types of creatives that do work in different ways. There's not one way to do a partnership. Some people will prefer to each bring a roster of ideas that they came up with, do kind of like a tournament between them. Sometimes, there's bloodshed, but there's a tournament, and then you take the best of the best to your creative director. There are teams that work that way. In our case, I think it's always the process of first bringing insights or interesting tidbits, nuggets of ideas, and then trying to see if we can, in our creative meeting, take those pieces, put them together, and make something better out of it. That's just how we liked to work from the very beginning. And, that was very important because when your creative process is different, often your partnership is really taxing. So I think what we wanted out of creative was very similar. Our processes, were very similar. And on top of that, we really liked each other, which also doesn't happen between two humans, working together, let's be real. So it was just a combination of all of those things. And we both knew that, judging from hearing other people's stories, looking around us from when we were students, it's not easy to check all those boxes when it comes to a creative partnership. So that's why we decided to stay together, because it wasn't worth trying to look for that again somewhere else. And there's no guarantee that'll happen.
Yeah, that's totally true. I've often told people when looking for a creative partner to make sure somebody that you wouldn't mind looking like, because you spend so much time together that eventually you just kind of merge into one person.
True. You will wear the same colors without telling each other a lot of the time. It's ridiculous.
No, I think people have creative partnerships that they think about, and they share more information than they do their spouses. So it's a really, it's such an important relationship. It's such a deep relationship, and yet it's so mysterious, I think, to anybody who is not part of the partnership. So this is getting such an interesting, peek into what it is that you guys go through, and something that's clearly very special between you. And you mentioned, Delilah, being two junior female creatives at BBDO, and most people in the audience know, and for the few that don't, I mean, that is a very storied agency. Some people, I remember, and a friend of mine got a job there. He said, I'm now at the Harvard of advertising agencies. So you were at this amazing agency, but you're only two women, and young women and juniors at the big storied place on 6th Avenue. What was that like? How was it like navigating as a team and as individuals?
I mean, I think that early on, any first job is very disorienting. And I think on top of that, BBDO is giant. So when you first get there, you are completely overwhelmed. You're just, you are not sure what to start with, how to prioritize things when you have several briefs, and you have several creative directors to talk to, and the process can be hard to navigate, and like figuring out how to say no to things that you just can't physically take on can be really hard, because you often feel like you just have to do everything. But I do have to say that everyone we ever worked with there was super understanding. And I feel like the most overthinking was coming like from us, and like if you ever were to come to a creative director and explain the situation, people would just give you extra day. And it was never a situation where you were just so overwhelmed you just couldn't handle it. I think there was also definitely we were gravitating towards creative directors who were women. And there was this one creative director who, like, I miss dearly, Susan Golkin, we were just like following her everywhere and like trying to get on every brief she was part of. And it was really amazing to see her in that role, because you could see yourself there. You could sort of like imagine that one day in the future you can be her. And so that was great. And she was really, like, when we were leaving BBDO, she called us and she was like, what are you doing? Like, it was really funny. Like, it was amazing to see how our relationship kind of grew from us like admiring her and like wanting to be part of her team, to her like seeing us as the team that she wanted to work with. But I do feel like, BBDO has this like line, the work, but it was about the people a lot of the time. I think that even though it was very crazy sometimes, you would find your people there, and they would kind of help you out. And we had each other, but we also had a lot of support system there.
Well, and you guys, tell me if my timing is slightly off. You either left hours before or hours after you got an award from BBDO. And tell me the timeline and
yeah, it was pretty crazy. We had like, there was this big Christmas party, and Delilah was actually in Korea, and because it was already like holidays, like the day before the holidays. And I was there and completely had no idea that it's going to happen, but they gave this like Best Creatives Award, which was very special, obviously, at the time. And just completely caught me off guard. And then I just like closed myself in the bathroom and was texting Delilah half of the night, explaining what happened, and just be like, oh my God, you have no idea. And at the time we were already kind of, thinking about, we got the offer, but we were still deciding whether we're going to take it. And we were just like taking the break to think it over. But when we came back, we kind of we went with it. We just wanted to try something new.
Well, I remember meeting you guys at around that time as well, having drinks with you. And I think Gerardo was with us. And it was 10 o'clock at night. And we said, it was probably afterwards. You were at Endeavor at this point. It was afterwards. It was like 10 o'clock at night, or maybe 11, maybe 12. I'm not quite sure. And we said, can we all share a ride home? And you're like, oh no, we're going back to the office. So these are award-winning people. And yet we know why. It's because they work like crazy. Now, I would break around at about this time for questions. We don't have any questions in the chat yet. So if you have questions for Vera and Delilah, put them in the chat. But it gives me an opportunity to ask about something that we haven't touched upon yet. So you did BBDO, the big agency, the big superstar agency. You excelled there. You went to Endeavor, which to me, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It's such a weird kind of place, which is almost more the norm, right? Everybody's trying something new and something different, but you guys leapt from something that was not solid, but it was at least a known, into something that was kind of new and figuring out what to do. And now you've made the shift over to Facebook, which is big, by the way. So if you thought BBDO was big, I hear that Facebook is even a little bit bigger. How does that work? What do creatives do? How do you make creativity work at Facebook?
Oh, that's a loaded question. It's definitely a very different environment. I think when we were coming into this opportunity, we knew it was going to be very different. It's in-house, it's a huge tech company. There were a lot of interesting challenges to this job. Even coming in, we knew that, the objectives would be very specific in terms of marketing. Basically, the team that we work for is the mother company of Facebook. It's not the app Facebook, it's the company that, that oversees and operates Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. We're trying to kind of create a brand messaging around that mother brand. So it's a very delicate process. It's also a huge kind of creative challenge because we cannot be talking about one entity. We need to make sure that we're talking about this company that oversees a lot of the products that people enjoy and love. And it's very different from all the work that we've been doing so far in that we're not really selling a product. We're not selling gin. We're not selling dog food. It's just marketing surrounding kind of awareness, making sure people are aware of what this company is doing and what their mission is, and how they're different from the Blue app, which is like a classic confusion that I think people have when they hear the name. Right. So in terms of the creative, a lot of what we do is surrounding storytelling rather than, it's hard. It's funny to say it's storytelling and it's different because advertising is storytelling, but a lot of the work is actually literally telling the stories of people who use Facebook platforms. Right. So it's kind of delving into looking for, first of all, really interesting stories of people doing great things and making progress on the platforms that we have to advertise, and then trying to find a creative solution to make something interesting out of it, telling the stories of those people, instead of trying to sell like a certain product or process.
Have you guys got any work that you want to take us through or just show us real quickly?
Maybe we can watch some of the Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, that project is a perfect example of, there's no CTA there necessarily. It's just a celebration of the community. And I think that's what Facebook, as like a larger brand, a Facebook company, as we call it, is trying to do. Just sort of celebrate the stories of people who are using their products.
Delilah, you want me to share the screen?
Yes, please. Zoom tends to give me a little trouble when I try to share screen.
So right now, everybody, I am on Delilah's portfolio, and I think that Marlene put links to both of your portfolios in the chat. So if anybody wants to check it out on their own, please do. Beautiful, beautiful work. So where do I click?
You can just click on those. Yeah.
Can you do this?
Yep. So I know we're kind of short on time, so maybe we could just watch. What do you think, Angelica and
Which one?
Henry? Vera?
Sure. Yeah. Let's watch.
This one here or this one? This one?
The one after that. You could scroll down. So those two are for the same protagonist. Yes, this one.
This one?
Yeah.
Don't. I want y'all to see all of me, not just the parts that are convenient or that speak English. Guava tree. I am Salva Chicana. I have so much love for my roots, but I want to do it my own way. I see you, but you don't see me now. Guava tree. Putting on makeup, it's an exaggeration of my femininity. I don't have to be perfect. Resilience means being able to absorb something and instead of letting it hurt you, having it empower you. So much has tested my family, and as an extension of them, it is my duty to be resilient. Like you, I was born in this country.
No, that's great. That's terrific. That's really beautiful. This one too?
Yeah, this is one of our favorites as well.
Many think Mayans are extinct, but we're still here. Call me Mayan, Mom, Native, Indigenous. That's who I am. I've been living in Oakland for the past 9 years. My grandfather had a vision. He was like, son, I know that at some point you will go out, teach the culture. And he was right. A couple years ago, I started teaching Mom. One of the biggest lessons teaching has taught me, there's always hope. There's always something good at the end of a journey. I represent my people. My traditional clothes, it's woven by a woman. All of the designs, all the textiles, it's my mom and my wife's art. Keeping my culture alive, that's an example of resilience, like not giving up.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful too. That's beautiful. Are you guys like, is this considered like a campaign in which all the director is the same and, you know, you're trying to keep the same kind of, yeah, it's very beautiful.
Thank you. We have 3 more pieces. We just put 3 up for timing's sake for this presentation, but basically for each protagonist, we had a 60-second video, and then the piece that you see towards the right of every video is a carousel unit. If you could click it back one more time. Yeah. So we had this idea of exploring the protagonists and their memorabilia per se. So the theme of the campaign was the resilience of the Latinx community. So we asked for personal objects for every protagonist that reminded them of their resilience and something that they take through life to give them strength. So for each protagonist, we had 2 elements of the story, the video aspect, and then this kind of carousel zine of us showcasing what the objects mean to the protagonist.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So it's really, to answer your question, Nancy, it's usually the kind of finding creativity in this job revolves around, first of all, finding the right stories. We went through probably like thousands of people trying to find these protagonists, you know, kind of knowing which story has that interest value, I think is the first step. And then the creativity around it involves, you know, how are we going to bring that story to life? In the case of Angelica, the musician, how is this video going to progress? And we had this idea of showing the process of her songwriting going into her performance towards the finale. And then for Henry, who is the Mayan descendant, who teaches a native language that is not Spanish in Oakland, California, we had this idea of showing his roots through, you know, through shooting him, writing down his ancient letters, And, you know, the director had this great vision of using projections to tell the story. So just directing that whole process and making sure that we're showing something still visually interesting and not something that's simply, you know, a docu-style video that every brand is nowadays doing on Instagram.
No, I was actually going to note that I mean, it's not an atypical genre to be able to tell portraits and stories, but they're always interesting. I had a creative director that just used to say faces. People love faces, and you know that doesn't change. And you see you operating in this genre though in a very, very distinctive, very, very, very beautiful way. I see that we have some questions popping up because the work is so spectacular, which is what people always have questions about. So let's bring Gerardo in, who's going to monitor some of the questions and ask them to you directly. Hey, Gerardo.
Hey, hi everyone. Thank you so much for everything. This is wonderful, wonderful.
For being in the grid. Thanks for joining us in the grid. Tell us some of the questions that we're seeing popping up in the chat.
Yes. There's some great questions. Let's see. What's your advice for aspiring creatives, especially those at the start of their journey? I mean, we have quite a few questions, so we could keep them short, but you know, but fun. So,
I mean, that's a tough one because obviously, the circumstances of us starting out have not like. In no comparison were hard with starting out during the global pandemic. And that's, I'm really sorry and I have no idea how that's going. But I think one of the things that was helping us a lot early on and was one of the reasons I actually, for example, got a job at BBTO were personal projects. I think, you know, we often get, discouraged with assignments that have to do for brands. And sometimes it's good to take a break and do something for yourself. And, you know, if you choose this profession, you are a creative person and that's the way you you can't just shove the creativity down and pretend like it's not there. And I think it's important to use it in the ways other than just advertising. So I would recommend trying and thinking of creative ideas that are really unusual and also something that you can actually execute easily on your own and working on that as an addition to your portfolio. Those are the things that I think creative directors actually pay the most attention to when they're looking at the books, because that shows originality, but it also shows that you really are enthusiastic about the field and you really care.
Great. That actually, that actually answered another question that we had. So anyway, we killed two birds with one stone. Because the other question was like, how do you find your inspiration? And I think you've answered that too. It's like, don't just look at advertising, look at everything. Sort of like, so that was 2 for 1. Great. I love it. I love it when it happens. Someone else, the last question down there, one of the last questions from a prospective student, actually overlaps with a question I wanted to ask you. The question is, what are some of the most useful career paths you have found accessible from the creative track? So basically from the creative track, my question, I think is the same question is specifically for Vera. How has your big degree, how being like a big student from the creative track, that's the same question, prepared you for a career in creativity?
That's a really good question. Well, I think one of the things that was really unusual about going to school at BIG was going specifically to this program was the fact that I think that's the only program that I know that actually teaches creatives how to be anything other than creatives and actually helps you understand what is the job of other people in the agency. And that is something that is honestly extremely important when you start out in your career, because you have so much more understanding and respect for every single part of the process. And you understand that if you don't have great relationship with your strategist, and if you don't get a chance to, get a sneak peek of the brief early on and talk to them about it, chances are you're not going to get any good creative ideas out of the project. And I think, or, you know, the role that account people play in the fact that they're saving you from the client 90% of the time, and you're just completely oblivious to that, and you think that nothing happened. They're just like burning fires in the background, and you're like, everything is great, having a drink, you know. And I think the amazing thing about this program is that you actually get a taste for a lot of the things that are happening in the background, usually in the agency. And you also are able to work on the creative part of the process and really concentrate on what you're there to do. And I feel like that was probably the biggest learning for me, because when I came to BBDO, I actually, you know, even though it was overwhelming, I actually understood what everyone was doing. And I wasn't completely feeling like I'm not getting the process.
That's great. That's great. There was another question here that, I mean, you at the beginning, you talked about the pandemic, and someone asked if actually, if working from home, like if how that affected your working relationship, what's happening right now.
Frankly speaking, not much has changed. We do talk to each other a lot still, a lot of video chatting and then phones dying happening. We don't see each other as much, and there's definitely this feeling of missing the firsthand creative interactions. But I think with video calls, we have been able to overcome that a lot. We usually just try very hard to coordinate our days ahead of time, since we can't be physically together. So just making sure that our schedules align and we're each kind of able to get some rest in between, to eat, but also setting up kind of frameworks of time so we can research and then meet up. It's just learning to kind of manage syncing within our partnership without being in the same office, because we used to literally do everything together from morning to evening.
And for a while you were in South Korea, right? So did you deal with that?
That was fun.
Maybe the A could be like the knee joint.
Was that?
I'm not sure who that was.
That was somebody else talking about joint pain. I have a question that kind of is off of somebody that's in the chat that you kind of spoke about implicitly, and it's somebody that's asking about what are the most useful career paths you've found accessible. They're asking from the creative track, but essentially from learning about creativity as a career. And I think listening to the two of you navigate what maybe from my perspective, because I'm an old sage and I'm looking at, the whole thing from the mountaintop. But I'm just astonished at how the two of you in a fairly short period of time have managed to figure out how to make your relationship, your big idea thinking work in various different types of places that are similar in some ways, but really very distinctive. And watching this kind of journey that you've been on, making you appear incredibly nimble. And yet I'm definitely seeing a through line here. What do you say about that? I mean, I don't know whether you realize it when you're doing it, but as I'm looking at you, you guys just look incredibly flexible. Like you've got these creative chops and you just keep finding ways to use them.
Yeah, it's a tough question though. And I don't know if I'm understanding it correctly. Like I'm curious if Robert is talking about, going beyond just creative profession in general, like being in, doing advertising. But I do feel like the skill that you get being in the creative track is coming up with ideas that other people wouldn't come up with. And I feel like even if you don't pursue the traditional career in advertising, let's say, this is a skill that will get you a job. Like that's definitely something that people are looking for, even if it's not a traditional creative job. Because if you're able to, I think that particular kind of thinking, it's almost like you're training a certain muscle in your brain. I feel like that particular kind of thinking makes you come up with solutions for things that other people would just give up on. And this big, and particularly the creative track, it just kind of like trains that muscle for you for a while. And then you leave the program and you have a portfolio to show the progress that you made. I don't know if that answers the question. Hopefully. Let's hope.
I mean, in some ways, I feel like you guys embodied the answer to the question. I'm just so impressed with the way that you've built a career in a short period of time through your amazing talent and perseverance and nimbleness and your skills and your innate talent. And I have some interesting thoughts about the side hustle thing. On the one hand, I think it's such a great outlet, but I also think that, you know, like you have to have a side hustle and all that kind of stuff is like too much pressure. But unfortunately, that will be How Creativity Works Part 2, because we've run out of time, which is not a great surprise to me, because I knew this evening would go by way too quickly with you, Vera and Delilah. And we have another little segment with Late Night with Gerardo Blumenkrantz. More important to me, and definitely Gerardo.
You could have said Jay Leno or something.
I could have said Jay Leno, Jimmy Fallon. But for now, we're going to take a break. But before we ask half of, or whoever is sticking around to stick around, I want to thank you guys. I don't know where you are in the grid at this point. You're up, you're down, you're left, you're right. I'm not quite sure. Vera and Delilah, you two are gems. You are and will always be one of our favorite creative teams. Gerardo and I love you. The big program loves you. We miss you. We miss that you're not teaching this. You taught in the fall. We missed you this fall. But we will find a way when the pandemic ends, in particular, to keep you in our lives physically as well as on Zoom. So thank you very much for being here tonight. I thank you on behalf of everyone. If everyone could give a little bit of love in the chat before Vera and Delilah take off.
Thank you. Just before we leave, I just want to quickly say that, you know, there were a lot of questions, and if you guys still want to reach out after the session, feel free to find us on LinkedIn and connect. And we are really feeling for you. Like, this is a crazy time, so please reach out, and in any way we can help, we will help.
That's a perfectly generous offer, the kind that I would expect you to give. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. Good night. Good night. Stay safe. And for people who are checking out at this point, good night to you all, and thank you so much for coming. But for those who are sticking around, don't leave yet. I'm going to turn the grid over to Gerardo. But before we do, and I see so many Bixters that came who probably are not sticking around, alums and all kinds of things. So good to see you. So good to have you here. But to get back into the more intimate way that we're going to progress, is I would love for you now, those of you who are sticking around, to go back on video so that Gerardo can see who he's talking to. Get some questions in. Gerardo's got a small presentation for you. And I don't have anything to say other than to turn it over to you, Gerardo.